Oh man, we are back. I'm excited about this because of all the different things that we've got to go over today. We've got the Heisman, we've got playoffs coming up this weekend. So many cool things happening. Let's talk real quick about the Heisman race and let's just kind of jump into that. So, I'll be honest with you. I do not envy any person who had a vote in this year's Heisman because I don't believe it was easy. And I don't care if you're a Travis Hunter guy or a Ashton Genty guy. I think both equally deserved the award. And I think if you put any of these guys in any other year, they would win it hands down walking away. But this year they went up against each other. Travis Hunter is honestly just a physical freak. Ashton Genty is the best running back in college. I'll go ahead and say of my lifetime. I do not remember watching a college running back take over games the way he has. Now, that said, you got to pick one of these guys. And I understand why people voted for Travis Hunter, but I will tell you this. I think he's a way better receiver than a defensive back. And if it were me, I would have voted for Genty. I think the bigger problem with the Heisman is the message that was just sent to all of these group of five players and all of these group of five programs. And that message is you don't matter. To have a season like Ashton Genty just had, and to give that award to Travis Hunter, I think is a really, really tough thing to do. And it's not just stats. I mean, we can talk about stats all we want. It's not just Ashton Genty ran for an obscene amount of yards. It's that fact that if you watched Boise State football, they came into the year with a coach kind of on the hot seat. Not many people too excited about them. Their only loss of the year is to who we all believe is the number one team in the country, Oregon. And if you look at the rest of this Boise State roster, what else do they have? He is it. And I keep hearing, well, Boise State's schedule, he didn't play against anybody. Okay, well, that's fair. If you want to have that argument, fine. I would disagree with you, but if you want to have that argument, fine. But the flip side of that argument is if you think Group of Five is so bad, you do understand that every one of his teammates were Group of Five teammates. So that can't be your argument because that guard that's blocking for him, Group of Five guard, that tackle that's blocking for him, Group of Five tackle, that running back that's handing the ball off to him, that's throwing them, Group of Five quarterback, that coach that's calling the plays for him, Group of Five coach. So if you want to tell me that Ashton Genty didn't deserve it because he played against Group of Five competition, keep in mind he played with Group of Five competition as well. I would have voted for Ashton Genty because I think he did everything we've ever asked any previous Heisman winner to ever do. Travis Hunter, I thought, had an amazing season. I think we have hyped him up as this top 3 receiver in the country, which I do think he is, and top 3 defensive back in the country, which I don't think he is. I think he's a good defensive back. I think he's an amazing receiver. And he had a good year, but most of this is media hype. Most of this is because his coach is Deion Sanders. Most of this is because they sent packages in the mail to media voting members. And then let's also keep in mind, most of this also boils down to TV contracts. Truly, you didn't think that the network that's hosting the award ceremony and also has a contract with the Big 12 was going to ever award this to a running back for the Mountain West. You didn't really think that was going to happen. Of course, that wasn't going to happen. This was purely based on what benefits ESPN the most. And I think that's why you see so many people right now upset about this situation is because everybody knows this was an ESPN decision. And all the media members, and this is what drives me nuts about the media. They're all pushing the exact same narrative. You don't have media members having an educational debate. You don't have media members giving you a different argument for Travis Hunter. It's all literally the same argument. And that argument hurts a player like Ashton Genty. And you just told all of these amazing, exciting Group of Five players that, hey, unless you transfer to a Power 4 program, you have no chance of winning an award as amazing as this. That to me does not sit well. And I think if you're any Group of Five player going into next season, if you're right now looking at the transfer portal and you're going, I want to be a Heisman winner, Unfortunately, your only path to that is to transfer. That is what they just told you by awarding this award to Travis Hunter. Now, let's talk about the transfer portal because there's lots of things going on with this too. So, James Franklin came out and he quoted this earlier. His quarterback, Bo Pribula, is transferring right now. I've probably butchered his last name. I'm notorious for that if you've never listened to me before. James Franklin said, "We got problems in college football, and I can give you my word, Bo didn't want to leave our program. And he did not want to leave our program until the end of the season. But the way the portal is and the timing of it and the way our team is playing, and when you play the position of quarterback and there's only one spot and those spots are filling up, he felt like he was in a no-win situation. And I agree for it. I agree with him. Number one, I hate it. Most importantly for Bo, I don't think it's in the best interest of the student athlete, and I don't think it's in the best interest of college football. Now, I've been a big critic of James Franklin over the years, but he is 100% on the money with this. So a couple of things. One, to me, we've got this expanded playoff. That's great. I'm excited for it. I will absolutely be watching Friday and Saturday. But the fact that we have, and I understand it's a backup quarterback, but the fact that we have a player going into a playoff this big in what should be a monumental moment in his college career, and he's opting out of playing in it because he feels the pressure to enter the portal, this is broken. This is awful. This is not what college football was ever supposed to be. And this is the problem that we've created with the transfer portal and with the NIL. The media loves to do this. When NIL became a thing and people in Northwestern filed that lawsuit, and you had guys like Jay Billis coming out and just absolutely tearing apart the NCAA and all this stuff, we kept talking about, okay, well, what about the slippery slopes? What about if you pay players and you'll have this, and this happen? And all we were ever told by the media is that's preposterous, that's a slippery slope, and no, that will never happen. And now we have this problem. And what does the media do? The media says the problem is on the NCAA, who warned you that this was going to happen if we brought in NIL and if we brought in a transfer portal. The media loves to do this. They love to create a massive mess. And then when you give in and allow them to create that massive mess, they love to blame you for it and then demand that you be the ones to clean it up. The media, people like Jay Billis and the people that pushed for NIL and the transfer portal, they're the ones to blame for the mess that we're in. And I think James Franklin, the end of his statement here is the most important thing. I don't think it's in the best interest of the student athlete. Well, no, duh. This isn't. We got to have a talk about what actual NIL means. So there's a player I know who just signed, and he's at a smaller program, but he just signed an agreement for like $50,000 in NIL. Now, what most people believe is that he's getting a $50,000 check. He is not getting a $50,000 check. He will not see one penny go into his bank account, because what $50,000 means is it's $50,000 towards something. That might be furniture. That might be a car to have on campus. That might be clothes to wear. It could be any number of things. It's valued at $50,000, but he's not getting $50,000. Now, that's not the case with every athlete, but it's the case with all of them, with the exception of just a few. There's a few athletes that you hear about, like Arch Manning. He's seeing money into a bank account. But aside from guys like that, they just aren't. And so for a player like this, he's being told you're going to get X amount of money in NIL. He's not going to see that in his bank account. He's never going to realize that money. He's going to get items valued at that money. And the exchange for that is he doesn't get to participate with his team as part of this playoff. And I do think a backup quarterback, like whenever we talk quarterback, we always talk the starter, and for good reason, because that's what we see on the game. But I tend to look at quarterback as the entirety of your quarterback room. And so losing a backup quarterback, he might be taking reps with the practice team or whatever. And so for the starting defense, now you've got to put another quarterback that you're going to go against. I don't think it's good for the dynamics of a team. But I also don't think it's good for a player to be making a decision based on $50,000 in values of items, not actual money. And that decision could be hurting his career. we got to understand James Franklin's value as a coach is not in his ability to call a timeout at the right moment of the game, which he never does. His value as a coach is also in his ability to develop players. One of my favorite coaches of all time is Frank Beamer. And one of the things I loved about Frank Beamer is his ability to take a 2-star or 3-star player and turn them into a star on the field. I mean, he would take guys you never heard of, and then all of a sudden you'd be like, oh, wow, look at that guy. He's an amazing player. And he just did this time and time again. And that wouldn't have happened, though, if those players after 1 year hadn't started and said, you know what? I'm going to go down the street to Old Dominion and go play for them because I can get a small NIL deal. Well, now they're leaving Frank Beamer's coaching and his development and his ability to feed into you and help you become a better player because he's this experienced, highly sought after coach. You're now leaving that to go to a program that's got a coach potentially on the hot seat. This isn't good for athletes. And the other problem that we've now got is we now have coaches at programs. Like, this is the problem with the portal. You guys see these players at the portal, you immediately go after the player. Well, keep in mind that these players are being told by some of their coaches, you need to hit the portal. You will not have a place here. They're being encouraged to literally go into the transfer portal. That's the new thing instead of being cut, is telling a player to go into the portal. That's not good either. The fact that this system is so messed up that it's literally telling you we don't care about the player. And it's purely transactional, which is not at all good for the sport. And it's made it really tough to watch. Like, if I think college football and what makes college football so special, it's not the name of a player coming to you. If Shedeur Sanders transfers to Duke, that's not like super exciting for Colorado fans who have followed Shedeur Sanders. What makes college football so interesting is, like, I live in Virginia, and me being able to watch a player go play at Midlothian High School, light up the high school field, then sign with a UVA or Virginia Tech. And he goes in his freshman year and he gets redshirted. And then his redshirt freshman year, he's the backup quarterback. And then his redshirt sophomore year, he gets a couple opportunities, plays some games, maybe gets to start a game or two. And then his redshirt junior, he's the guy at that program. And then his redshirt senior year, he is just a star. And we literally grow up with these kids. That is what has made college football so great, is that when Virginia Tech used to take the field, or Tennessee would take the field, or Georgia would take the field, it was literally they were representing the best of the best in your state. When Tennessee would play Georgia, it would be Tennessee's way of life versus Georgia's way of life. And now it's not that, because the starting quarterback from Tennessee never grew up in Tennessee. The starting quarterback from Miami, I believe, is from Los Angeles, California. Arch Manning didn't have any relationship with Texas. That's not supposed to be what college football is about. I'm not saying everybody has to go to their in-state program or anything like that, but I'm saying the fact that players are just transferring after a year. We've got some players that are now transferring to their 4th or 5th program in 6 years. That doesn't even compute. That doesn't even make sense. How can you relate to these players? How can you root for these players? And as a coach, how can these coaches dive into these players and develop them the way they should be? And I think there's going to be a lot of players who would have been legitimate NFL prospects, but their potential is never realized because they transferred way, way, way too early. There was a player played for Liberty last year, CJ Daniels. He transferred to LSU, and I understand why. LSU gave him a big, big NIL deal. I think it was around $300,000. Liberty said, we can't touch that for a receiver. We're not even going to touch up our quarterback. So he goes to LSU. He gets a payday. Again, was it valued goods? Did he actually get a check in the bank? I don't know. But he goes over to LSU, and he's been like the 4th or 5th best receiver. He's a no-name. Nobody at LSU even knows about him. And LSU had a down year, had an awful year. If he had stayed at Liberty, he could have got another year of development from Jamie Chadwell and his position coach. He could have come back. He would have been the star player in CUSA. I think he'd have one more year of eligibility where he could do that again. Like, that would have been a much better path for him, and he would probably be a sought after receiver that would be going somewhere in the draft. Now he's a no name at LSU. If he went into the draft this year, he would not get drafted. He'd have zero chance. And he's going to transfer to his third team in 3 years this year. That's preposterous. That doesn't even make any sense. And so I completely agree with everything James Franklin is saying. Now, there's been some rumors that there's going to be a college football commissioner, that you have coaches right now pushing for a college football commissioner. Is that the answer? I don't know. I think part of the problem right now is the NCAA doesn't feel like they can enforce anything because the quote unquote rules they had, which they should have done a much better job of, but the passive rules that they had, the government just literally stepped all over it and said, no, you don't have any authority. So again, have a college football commissioner, do all the things. I don't think it's really going to make a difference. I think right now the NCAA is just saying, look, you made this mess. We're not going to clean it up. And college football is just in a really, really bad spot. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, truthfully, I think the only possible solution is because the government got involved and stepped all over the NCAA, the only way to fix it is for the government to get back involved and reinstate the NCAA and give them way more oversight over the sport. Because right now they do not have any. These coaches are doing whatever they want. I mean, we literally have players that are currently, there's an Alabama cornerback that just went into the portal. Like this was today. And he was offered some ungodly, like 7-figure offer for getting into the portal. He wasn't even in the portal. He got offered this as a player for Alabama. So he now goes into the portal being promised 7 figures. Now, here's the other problem with the portal and all these promises. People don't realize, like, the portal is not some, like, figurative, like, imaginary place. Like, the portal is like this real legitimate thing. And so the problem is when a player like that gets offered something, whoever made the offer has no idea if they can academically qualify to get into that university. Now, a lot of times this isn't a problem, but last year there was a group of 5 player who wanted to transfer to a Power 4 school, and he was offered as a player of this group of 5 team. And he goes into the portal, had already lined up the school, but as soon as he goes into the portal, that is when the school that's recruiting him can request his transcripts. So they get his transcripts. Well, they find out his grades absolutely were putrid. And a lot of the classes that he was quote unquote passing weren't actually acceptable at the university he was transferring to. Now, this player had been offered somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 to 250 grand to transfer to the Power 4 program. The group of 5 program that wanted him had offered him about 120, I think 120, 130,000 to stay at the group of 5 program. So he goes into the portal thinking he's going to get 250. They end up having to revoke their offer because his grades suck. So then he contacts the group of 5 school and says, yeah, I'll take the 120. Well, now the group of 5 school says, well, that was before you went to the portal. Now that you're into the portal, it's not 120 anymore. It's more like 80,000. And so he literally cost himself 40 grand. Now, again, was this money in his bank account? Was this goods? I have no idea. I just know the numbers and what I was told, but he cost himself 40 grand because his grades weren't good enough to transfer. And so that's part of this too, is it's not just that it's not good for these kids and the longevity of their potential careers and that being realized just financially. This is really, really awful for a lot of them. And you got to remember, like, we love to poke fun at these kids, and I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody. I love just blasting kids on social media when I see them like smiling after throwing picks on the sideline and stuff like that. Like, I do that all the time. But we got to remember, these kids are 20, 21, 22. Like, I don't know about you, but at 21, I shouldn't have been responsible for like any money. Like, I really needed somebody to be in charge of that. We have kids literally negotiating contracts. And you could say, okay, well, some of them have agents. Well, okay, but keep in mind that the majority of these contracts, again, are not for a ton of money. And so these agents that are getting paid, maybe a 5 to 10% agent fee, uh, they're not acting in the best interest of the player. They're literally just trying to make a quick buck, and none of them actually represent players in the NFL. They're all wannabe agents that really don't have any business being agents representing these kids. The whole system is a complete mess right now. And unless the government's going to get involved, there is just not an easy fix for this whatsoever. All right, let's talk about Belichick, who I think actually I misspelled his name in the title. No, we're good. Okay, I thought I put two L's on there. So Belichick goes to UNC. And on top of that, we now have Mike Vick, who looks like he's going to take the Sacramento State job, which is at some point in the next couple of years going to be a FBS program. They've been an FCS school with plenty of money for quite a while. They've done a decent job, and now they're talking about bringing in Mike Vick. And so Mike Vick's getting into coaching. Bill Belichick's now getting into coaching, and I kind of find this approach to be truly unique. We saw West Virginia just hire Rich Rodriguez, and we saw Central Florida just bring back Scott Frost. Usually in the past, we see like group of 5 coaches get promoted. We see offensive coordinators, defensive coordinators get promoted, and this year we're seeing guys like Bill Belichick get the job at UNC. Now, Colin Cowherd had this whole thing about how Belichick didn't have any NFL opportunities. And so, he's taking the UNC job because he didn't have any other opportunities. I'll tell you this. Are we sure this is who UNC actually wants? Are we sure they weren't the ones settling here for Belichick? Because I don't think in an ideal world, UNC would be hiring a 72-year-old coach that came to them with a 300-page contract that includes a requirement to hire his son. I don't think that was on UNC's like, yes, let's do it. And I know for a fact that Jamie Chadwell in Central Florida were deep in talks and nothing ever materialized. But they were deep in talks. There was an actual interview. I'm not going to get into all the details, but I do know that actually happened. But they ended up bringing back Scott Frost. And then you have Rich Rodriguez going back to West Virginia. Now, West Virginia fans will tell you, oh, Rich Rod is who we wanted all along. Guys, is the same coach that after he failed at Michigan, all you guys did was talk about, thank God he's not our coach anymore. Like, literally, West Virginia fans are some of the most delusional fans I've ever seen in my life. But there has been a major, major shift in who these programs are going after. And on top of that, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. We had another coach, Dave Clawson, step down today. He stepped down from Wake Forest. And I'm seeing this seismic shift in these college football jobs and whether or not they're actually attractive to some of these coaches. And I think because of the differences in the portal, to go along with the NIL nonsense, to go along with how hard it is to already coach 18 to 22-year-olds, and then on top of that, the insane expectations that a lot of these fan bases have, I think being a college coach right now is just not super desirable. I think Dave Clawson decided he wanted to step down from Wake Forest, not because he planned to, not because this was he was exhausted from coaching or because he wanted to sell into retirement. I think he just looked around and goes, look, I can't keep developing players just for them to transfer to Notre Dame. I can't keep developing players just for them to go somewhere else. I can't keep going into the portal and hoping this transfer from Elon works out. Like, I can't, like, I totally get that from Dave Clawson. And we're getting into a point with college football where it's really going to become like baseball, but on a insanely different scale. Like in baseball, you have 30 teams. But in baseball, because you only have 30 teams, there's only so many roster spots. So yes, the Yankees may outspend everybody, but there's still only so many roster spots. So the Royals are going to get somebody. But in college football, we have 140 teams right now. And so what that means is you're going to have programs that, because they don't have the budget, literally will not have any chance at competing. And I think Dave Clawson just saw the writing on the wall and goes, I can't do that. And I know UNC's planning on spending a ton of money and NIL and all that stuff, but for how long? They have a donor now, but UNC fans don't flock to the stadium the same way Alabama fans do. And at some point, that donor is going to be looking at his return on investment going, I can't keep pouring money into this. And I don't know that Bill Belichick is the answer at UNC either. Bill Belichick's a defensive coach that never really embraced the best quarterback to ever play the game. I mean, I'm sure he's a good defensive coach, but he's going to try and run this thing. I mean, he was introduced by UNC the other day as the head coach and general manager. Why do we need a general manager? The head coach is the general manager. Well, I don't need you to be introduced as both. And to me, that just tells me, okay, he had that requirement. And that just speaks to how much he does not understand this sport. So he goes to Carolina now. And I think Carolina, in an ideal world, would have had a coach like Jamie Chadwell. But if you're Jamie Chadwell, why would you leave a program like Liberty? They're paying you $4 million a year. You're going to crush everybody in your conference. So, yeah, you could take UNC, but nobody's going to remember you because there's, I don't know, 20 teams in that conference now. So if you have a really good season, you might finish 7th. Like what Manny Diaz did at Duke this past year was absolutely remarkable. Won 9 games. Nobody's going to remember it because at the end of the day, Duke finished like 5th in the ACC. Like nobody's going to remember finishing 5th in the ACC. And so Belichick could have an incredible year at North Carolina, and it won't move the needle at all. And I think you're seeing a lot of these coaches get out of the business because they know, okay, the conferences are huge. The NIL thing's a complete mess. The transfer portal is way too complex, and I can't seem to keep guys. And these coaches, I think, got into it because it's not just they enjoy I formation versus shotgun. I think they got into this sport because they enjoyed developing players and pouring into kids and being able to build a team. But how can you do any of that if these kids have opportunities and are getting quote unquote money from other programs in order to transfer? It makes it really, really difficult to pour into a kid and then all of a sudden he leaves. And so I don't think, like, I look at the Belichick thing and I look at, what happened today with Dave Clawson and, Sacramento State's going about bringing in Mike Vick. I mean, there's a lot of coaches that these jobs would have normally gone to, and they're not going there anymore. Now, I do think there is an aspect to this too, where North Carolina is bringing in Belichick because an 18-year-old kid to have the opportunity to go play for one of the best coaches to ever coach, it's, pretty interesting. I think for an 18-year-old kid to go play for Michael Vick, yeah, that's pretty interesting. We've seen Deion Sanders, the impact he's had on college football. He's getting visits from people who maybe won't commit to Colorado, maybe won't go to Colorado, but he's getting visits from every kid because he's Deion Sanders. If you have a chance to go meet Deion Sanders, are you really going to pass that up? And that's why Deion came out a couple of weeks ago and said, yeah, I'm not traveling to anybody's house. Why would he? They all go to him. The experience is in meeting Deion. It's in being able to see him. And if you have to fly to Colorado, why wouldn't you do that? So I get it. All right, let's look at the college football bracket here real quick. I'm going to make a couple of predictions and really give you who I think wins each game here. So we'll start. Clemson plays Texas. Texas is an 11.5-point favorite. Now, I think Texas wins this game, but I will say this. Dabo Swinney, who, applause to Dabo today, he got his first player out of the portal. I'm not a fan of the portal, but if I were a coach, I'd absolutely be using it. So I think this game is interesting because Dabo Swinney has experience in big games and has won a lot of them. And Steve Sarkisian, in a lot of big games, has outthought the room. This is an 11.5-point favorite. And Clemson plays real defense. They could keep this game close, and if it comes down to late game coaching or late game management, I think that could favor Dabo Swinney. Now, I'm going to pick Texas to win it because I just think they're the better team. But the experience here from Dabo versus Sarkisian is something really to watch, because the one thing Sarkisian, his one Achilles heel, is Dabo's strength, and that is managing the game at the end. Um, Tennessee plays Ohio State. Ohio State is a 7-point favorite over Tennessee. I think this is an absolutely fascinating game. And we got today, there's an official that apparently has some gears to grind against Tennessee, and he's reffing this game. So that's going to be fun. I think it's fascinating. If Ohio State wins, how do you fire Ryan Day? He won a playoff game. But I also think if this game is close at halftime and it's 14-14 or something like that, which I think it's going to be, I think the pressure starts to build up on Ohio State. And I think there's just going to be this overwhelming Ryan Day getting in his head, not coaching the right way. Ohio State, they've heard all the noise. Sometimes that can be motivating. I don't think it's going to be in this game. And I think that's a Tennessee team that can score and score quick. So Ohio State might even get off to a little lead early, like 10-0, but Tennessee can strike really, really quick. I'm going to take Tennessee to win, but I think it's close. And yeah, it's 7 points is a lot to overcome, but I think Tennessee will. That's my big upset of the first round. SMU and Penn State. Penn State, an 8.5-point upset. I think Penn State's a really, really good football team. I do not buy into Southern Methodist at all. I think Southern Methodist played in an incredibly weak ACC. If you saw that game against Clemson, yes, did they come back and make it a game? Sure, but they ended up losing in it. There were moments there where it looked like it was going to be just a total blowout. Tennessee's really, really well coached. Tennessee's got a really, really good quarterback, which they have not had in a while. I'm seeing Penn State, rather. And so I think Penn State comes out in this game. I think they're going to get off to a hot start. The way James Franklin coaches, if he gets off to hot starts, teams do not come back. His defenses absolutely suffocate you. And I don't think SMU's got the firepower to get over a team like that. So I'll take Penn State to win, and I think they're going to do it big. Indiana plays Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame, a 7-point favorite. So if we're looking at these 4 games, Texas has the biggest edge, 11.5 points. Penn State's 8.5, Ohio State 7. And, Vegas is telling you Notre Dame's just a 7-point favorite over Indiana, which means they somewhat like Indiana's players. And keep in mind, Notre Dame has a huge home field advantage. So if you put this on a neutral site, this would really be like Notre Dame -3, which is fascinating to me. And both of these teams are Indiana. Who would have thought at the start of the season we'd have 2 teams from Indiana in the playoff? I'm going to take Notre Dame to win because I think what Indiana does well plays right into what Notre Dame does well. I do think it's really, really close, though. And I do think Cignetti against Freeman in a close game is really, really interesting because keep in mind, Cignetti has experience in FCS winning playoff games. So he knows these games. He knows late game management. And if Indiana upset Notre Dame, I would not be shocked at all. Texas and Arizona State with them playing the Chick-fil-A ball. I would take Texas to win that. I think Arizona State's had a really fun season. Texas is just way too talented. This is a team that for the most of the year we thought was the number 1 team in the country. I just think they're going to suffocate Arizona State with all their talent. I don't see a tremendous coaching advantage over Sark in that game, so I'll take Texas to win that. Oregon and Tennessee would play in the Rose Bowl. I don't know that it's much of a home field advantage, but I will say this. Tennessee fans are flocking to Columbus, Ohio. That right now, based on the tickets that have been sold, could be 50-50 in terms of the fans that are there. So the question would be is if they beat Ohio State, if you're a Tennessee fan and you travel to the Ohio State game and you win, are you then traveling to the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day 2 weeks later? I don't know. I could probably convince my wife to go to 1 game. I don't know that I could convince her to go to 2 games. Especially when they're both away. If one was in Knoxville and then we're going to the Rose Bowl, okay, I can do that. But to travel to Columbus and then to travel to California for the Rose Bowl, I think would be tough. So I think it's going to be a heavy Oregon crowd in that game. And I think Oregon has too much talent and too much experience. Keep in mind, this is a senior-laden Oregon team. Most of those players, aside from the quarterback, were on this roster last year. I think Oregon beats Tennessee, and even if Ohio State gets to this point, I think they beat Ohio State pretty handedly. So I'll take Oregon to get to the semifinals. Penn State and Boise State, I don't know. I think Boise State in a game like that, they're going to run the ball, and that's going to keep the ball out of Drew Aller's hands, and it's going to keep it fairly close. So I do think Penn State, again, too much talent for Boise State. They're going to get into the Orange Bowl, and it's also absolutely ridiculous that Penn State, to get into the semifinals, has to beat Southern Methodist and Boise State. If they do not get into the finals this year, I think there have to be legitimate questions raised about, like, I like James Franklin. I think he's a good coach. I met him in person once. But is he the right guy for a program like Penn State if he can't get you into the Orange Bowl this year? I think they'll beat Boise State, but it's a very easy road to get there for Penn State. So then we would have Georgia and Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. Georgia at times looks like a great team. And then at times, like the Georgia Tech game, you're just going, what are you doing? The game against Alabama. I mean, I do not like the way they start games at all. I think they're super lethargic. I think they have no urgency on the offensive side. I don't like it. But at the same time, I don't trust Notre Dame to go down to New Orleans and beat a Georgia team. We've seen Notre Dame versus Georgia before. Georgia wins that game. And I don't think this is going to be any different. So I'll take Georgia to beat Notre Dame and go on to the Orange Bowl. So now we would have Texas versus Oregon in the Cotton Bowl. My pick in that game would be Oregon. I think Dan Lanning is a better coach than Steve Sarkisian, and I like Sarkisian. I just think the world of Dan Lanning. I think he's one of the best coaches in the game right now. I think the world of him, and I think at some point he's going to win a championship, or he's going to go to the NFL before he has the chance to do that. So I'll take Oregon to beat Texas. I think they've got more dynamic playmakers, particularly on the defensive side than Texas does. And I think Oregon's got the quarterback to be able to go toe-to-toe. And Texas, keep in mind, we don't know what the quarterback situation is. There are people calling for Quinn Ewers to be benched in the final couple games of the season for Texas. That is not at all happening with Oregon. Oregon's got an offense that Texas, I don't think, can go toe-to-toe with. So I'll take Oregon to win that. The Orange Bowl, we would have Penn State versus Georgia. Again, I just think Georgia's the best team in that side of the bracket. And I don't think James Franklin against Kirby Smart in a game of that magnitude presents any edge. We see Penn State beat a lot of teams they should beat. We don't really ever see them beat teams they shouldn't beat. So I think Georgia wins that game and wins it handily. Like literally the final four games. I mean, Oregon, Texas would be fun, I think. But Georgia and Penn State, I don't think would be fun. I think Georgia would crush them. So then we would have Georgia and Oregon in the championship game. Honestly, right now, my pick would probably be Oregon wins it. I think it would be real close. But like we saw Haynes King at Georgia Tech give Kirby Smart's defense fits. What Haynes King does, Dylan Gabriel does a lot better. I think that would be a big problem for Kirby Smart. And I know he's a smart defensive guy, but the other thing is Oregon's offensive line, they can handle Georgia's pass rush. They don't need to hold a tight end back. They don't need to do anything like that. So when Georgia brings all these exotic blitzes, I just don't think it's going to give Oregon the same issues that it gives some of these other teams late in games. So Oregon is my pick to win the championship. Yes, it's chalk at the end of the day. But I'm not going to bet against what I believe has been the best team in the country all season long. All right, that's it. That's the Fourth String Podcast. Have a good night.